Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. Tonight, continuing on with the reloading information that I've been trying to gather and make this into a series that we can start getting ready to interview Lance from Go Rogue, who's a little bit more of a reloading expert than me. He may argue that. He says I know a lot too, but you'll see where I'm going. One of the biggest questions you have when you start reloading is what kind of powder to use. And there's a lot of questions around that. So the first thing you want to know is what is smokeless powder and what is the main differences. So smokeless powder or rifle powder or pistol powder, modern gun powder, actually burns at a different rate. It's a progressive burning powder that instead of it burns at a set rate each type of grain or each type of formula it has, versus gunpowder, which can bust all at once. Now, why does that matter? A slow-burning powder is best for heavier bullets and longer barrels. Okay, so you're looking at like magnums or large rifles because you're pushing something that's in excess of 150 grains of bullet weight I don't want to mess with the metrics because we live in the United States. So up to 200 and beyond, what you want is a slower burn rate so that you build up the most pressure possible in the cartridge and get the best burn possible to maximize the gas pressure to push the bullet downrange. Faster burn rates are good for shorter barrels and lighter bullets. So take this to the extreme. So this doesn't work with pistols because pistols automatically have heavier bullets than most rifles, but they usually have extremely shorter barrels compared to what a rifle would have. But if you're looking like a 5.56 or 223, same thing basically. A lot of people will argue with me. We can go down the rabbit hole of why I'm probably right and you're probably wrong. There used to be a huge difference between 5.56 and 223 when the 223 was first initially designed. Most modern rifles that say they're 223 are 5.56 chamberings, and they do this because it's simple in machining and most people don't pay attention, so they'd rather err on the side of safety. 223s technically should have a tighter chamber than a 5.56, but I digress. So with like a 5.56, you're using a 55 grain bullet in a very small cartridge in a very much an abbreviated barrel length. So our average rifle barrel length is about 22 to 24 inches. Some of them are 26 for like a hunting rifle or a hunting cartridge. And that's designed for accuracy, and that's also designed around the burn rate of the powder charge in the cartridge specifically. So with a 5.56, you want that faster burn rate than you would say like a 270. Okay. Now, when it comes to pistols, the big thing you want to look at is pistol powder. So a lot of people, when they start reloading, they'll choose a pistol to start reloading. It is a little bit different process in that you have 3 dies instead of 2. You can do 3 in both types of reloading, but most reloading sets are for pistols are sold in 3s, and you have a decapper and a basically expand like the initial sizing of the cartridge for a pistol cartridge or for a pistol die. The second one is an expander, which expands the throat or the neck of the cartridge where you can place a bullet in. And the last one usually is a crimper or a bullet seeder. And what it does is it actually allows you to get that perfect factory seal around it to allow the gas to exchange when it goes off. Now, when you start looking at shotguns, so with shotguns, it depends on the heavier shots versus like a slug or buckshot. You want a relatively slower burn rate. As for the lighter shots, for like birdshot, you want a little relatively higher burn rate. Okay. Now, I've talked about the rifle concerns, so I'm not going to get into that. But this is kind of a synopsis of why you look at powders. So those numbers on powder charges or on powder cans or bottles, that refers to the burn rate according to formula. Okay. Now, there's a lot that goes into this, so it depends on how much surface area that said formula has and how they make it into pellets, how they make it into flakes, or how they make it into ball. And all this relates to how the powder is actually going to perform and burn in your given cartridge, whatever it is. So these are why you look at burn rates, though, is you look at them because it varies the powder charge so much so that you have to take this into consideration. If you're using a slower burning powder for a smaller capacity cartridge, that may work if you have a longer barrel. It may also cause too much pressure. This is where reloading data it becomes your best friend, and that's why it is such a key integral part to reloading. When you look, the first thing you do when you start getting into reloading or start thinking about reloading is find accurate data, load data for bullets and the powder charges that go in said cartridge, whichever cartridge you're looking at. What do I personally recommend for someone to start out with? I actually recommend you start with a rifle cartridge. Now, a lot of people will say that's kind of ass backwards because of the high pressure that it has and the propensity of people in the newer loading places, loading experiences, to overcharge their cartridge. But this is where I would differ and say that it may make you more precise and make you a better hand loader because you're going to pay more attention to this. Now, a pistol cartridge usually is a lot more forgiving. And I say that with bated breath because, again, you double charge any cartridge, whether it's a pistol, a rifle, a shotgun, anything. You're running the risk of rupturing the cartridge, exploding the gun, and causing extreme self-harm to you. So, there's a reason why manufacturers say don't use reloaded ammunition. The reason is that's a liability thing. They don't want you to use reloaded ammunition because if it's reloaded improperly, it can cause damage to you, to the gun, and that puts them in a liability lawsuit that they're not willing to fight or not wanting to fight. And if you're using reloaded ammunition and that comes out in court, odds are you're going to lose. Okay. Now, what are the real risks of reloading? Okay. When it comes to powder, you have to be Johnny on the spot. You have to be careful. Whether you're using a progressive reloader that does a lot of this stuff automatically, so a powder measure that and a reloading set that actually advances the rounds as you cycle it, so that it will first size it or decap it, size it, and get it ready for the next part, or prime it. That's the next stage. Then it'll charge it, and then it'll put the bullet in. Now, again, when you're doing this, it's usually for large volumes of ammunition. Okay, for precision loaders like myself, I do it one at a time, one stage at a time. Now, this also makes me very careful at what I do, because unlike a lot of loaders, I measure each charge, and as I'm measuring the charge and putting it in the cartridge, I actually put the bullet on and seat it and crimp it, all one motion. Because I have been reloading for a long time. I've seen my brother, who is not always 100% thinking about what he's doing. He's got a little bit of ADHD. And I've seen him double charge a cartridge. Luckily, I've not seen him blow up a gun. But what usually happens with a rifle cartridge when you double charge something is that it overflows the case itself. And it's pretty evident. Now, a lot of people will charge their cartridges, all of them at once, and then go on to the next step and whatever. But what I've found in my reloading process, sample size of 1, not really. I would say there's a lot of experience that I bring to the table because of my uncles, my brothers, and my friends that have all reloaded. I've taught them this process, and my uncles and my brother and my dad all taught me this process. Is putting the bullet on right after you charge something means that you've already self-sealed it. You don't have to worry about dust, contaminants getting into the cartridge. But it also means that you're making sure that you're not double charging it or something causes it to go boom when you don't want it to. Okay. So you find your reloading data because this is important for the cartridge and the charge you're using. But it also matters for the powder, like what powder you have. The longer you get into reloading, the more you do this, that is, you find that certain powders can be used for multiples of calibers. Okay. Case in point, when you look for the 5.56, and then you go ahead and upgrade and buy an AR-10, or in my case a PTR, because a 308 is one of my dad's favorite calibers. We used to call it a God's caliber, meaning Dad always thought it was perfect, but it's not. It has its flaws, but it also is a very good cartridge. You upgrade to a 308. I can use Varget in both guns. In my AR-15s, any of my 5.56s, I can use the Varget in that. I can also use it in a 308. You can also use it in a lot of other calibers. That's the whole point of getting used to what you're using, is you learn your favorite powders, how they perform, what kind of pressures they have, and you learn the data you're doing here. This is why this is kind of a hobby for a lot of people. For me, it's not a hobby. It's part of the way of life that I've had to live. You know, there was a point in time where reloading was a lot cheaper, and it made ammunition way more affordable. Nowadays, I would say if you're reloading, it's one to learn the actual subject matter and learn how to do it, and to produce precision ammunition, or to produce ammunition you know 100% you can source and get the components and you know everything about it. Because a lot of the fly-by-nights that are going around that sell ammunition don't necessarily have the load data and don't have a very good reputation. This is why I stand behind Go Rogue, because they really do Lance really tries to make sure that he's always performing for every make model he can, for every caliber that he loads for his ammunition. And that's kind of the mindset you need to have with your own reloading, is you have to be very much in the know. This isn't something you just pick up and you just think you're going to excel at. This is going to take some hard work and effort, and it's going to take a lot of book learning. Whether you want to book learn or not, you're going to do this. You're going to spend some very quality time looking at websites for reloading data and combing through reloading books for the particular cartridges and the loads you're looking for. And once you found them, then you're going to start tailoring them to perform the way you want them to. Whether it's for long range or volume, meaning you're turning out tons and tons of rounds, so you have a set number of rounds you want to get out of a pound of powder or out of an 8-pound powder, because that becomes economical or not. I can tell you I've never in my life, as a reloader, sat there and broke even with the amount of time I've done reloading. Okay, because of the precision nature of what I do personally to reload, there's more time and effort in each cartridge I make, whether it's a pistol cartridge or a rifle cartridge or a shotgun shell. I put more time and effort in setting up this stuff, prepping the cases, charging them, priming them, doing all the casework, all the pieces, parts to reloading to end up with a finished product. Now, my product I will stand behind in anybody's gun, and I've got the reloading data, and I've got the friends and family that I've let use my reloads, because I consider them precious, to show that they work, and they're accurate, and they're tailor-made for the caliber one and for the type of animal I'm hunting usually, because that's what I was really trying to do with reloading. And to get the precision for long-range shooting, because that's where I like to live. I personally despise reloading for pistols because of their size, because of how much you have to do just to get the cartridge that you're just going to spend some time on the range with. Even training, if I had a progressive loader where I was turning out volumes of cartridges, that would make more sense with pistols because I use a lot more pistol ammunition than I do rifle ammunition. I became a pistol shooter because of becoming a concealed carry. When I took that moment of realizing I'm my own first responder, I took it upon myself to start training very heavily. You know, there isn't a week nowadays that I don't go by where I at least go take a box of 50 of 9mm, because that's my preferred carry caliber, or a box of 380, and I switch between the two calibers, and I go out and train to make sure that I'm still effective at what I do, because the way I see shooting is it's a perishable skill. So I want to be at the top of my game, because if it ever is a day that I need it in that, not just going out and plinking, not just training, but I actually need it, that skill, and I need that round, and I need that gun to perform 100%, or if it's my life or somebody else's life on the line, I want to know that that's going to happen. So I invest heavily in that training and this way of life. So as you start thinking about reloading, some of the questions you need to ask yourself are, why are you going to do this? If it's just for volume, then you need to start looking at progressive stuff and invest heavily in that equipment. That equipment's more expensive. If you're just getting into this to see if you want to do it, you know, I have two different reloading setups. I have one that will literally fit in a box or a bag, like a backpack, because I used to have to reload off of a kitchen table. So I have a hand press, I have a set scale, a digital scale, a small digital scale that I can carry with me. I have powder measures that I can set on a kitchen table and roll forward. I have tumblers, not tumblers. I have, what do you call it? Give me a second. I don't know why my brain farted, but it's called a powder trickler. And you put a little bit of your powder from the same batch. You want to keep the lots of powder together, because they, even though they came and have the same formula and same burn rates supposedly, in practice what I've noticed is there's usually a slight variance unless you bought a huge lot of this. But from that same pound of powder in a powder trickler, you put a little bit of that powder in there, and I flake that to the grain, or to the 10th of grain that I'm going to use for each powder charge I have. So again, I'm a precision loader. So I make my cartridges try to be as precise as they can be with powder charges, with the same type of cartridges, the same type of primers, which that's another subject we'll start talking about probably tomorrow. And the same type of bullet that I'm using. You know, I'm married to certain brands of bullets. I'm married to certain weights of bullets. And I stick to them because I get consistent performance. And that is why my hand loads seem to perform at other people's rifles as good as, if not better sometimes, than they do in my own rifles. So these are some pieces I'm going to give, piece of advices I'm giving you for a piece of advice. I swear I've not been drinking. I'm just really tired. When it comes to hand loading and specifically powder. Like, share, subscribe. Most importantly, be great.